So, a lot of people are trying to have conversations right now about transmaxing, and I'm not going to talk about that in this video because the longer I've been observing the conversation a lot of you guys are having about transmaxing, the more it just sounds like you guys are transphobic, if I'm being frank. I've seen videos about how Lily Tino is transmaxing, about how Caitlyn Jenner is transmaxing, and transmaxing, just to really quickly go over it, in the way that we're discussing it right now, it's this idea of usually in a group of men encouraging other men to transition medically because it's a lot easier for them to be a woman and they're never going to be able to fulfill this idealistic, role of the Chad who gets all the women and yada, 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 right? Like the fact that a lot of you guys have tried to take this as a time to talk about your least favorite trans person on the internet. Yeah, I don't think we're really having a conversation about anything real. But I want to talk about some of the themes within this because there are things that are true about this conversation. I just want to share my perspective as a transgender woman who transitioned a very long time ago. I just turned 35. I started my medical transition at 19. I came out as trans at 15. I've been speaking about being trans on the internet for most of my life, and I got a lot of things to say. So one of the things that I will say about this is when you're a trans woman existing and you have an interest in men and you want to go on the internet to find people to date, you are going to be introduced to the underground of cross-dressers, right? Now, when I say the underground of cross-dressers, let's just talk about what I mean, because I think that this is something that a lot of people don't quite understand, and it's worth talking about. Now, when I was living in predominantly conservative communities, this is when I experienced this the most. I will say that maybe because of where I'm at in my trans life and also the city I currently live in, maybe I'm not going to run into these people as much, but I ran into these people a lot when I was younger and earlier in my transgender life, right? There are men in this world who live their lives in a way where you would look at them and never imagine them as anything other than particularly hyper-masculine heterosexual men. And some of those men in their private lives cross-dress. And when I say that they cross-dress, this can take on a bunch of different directions. And I've tried to make this clear when I discuss cross-dressers. Not everyone who cross-dresses is really someone who fits into the description of what I'm going to share here. But there's a type of man who cross-dresses and they create this entire persona of basically the kind of woman that they want to have sex with, right? This is where I think autogynephilia as a concept has a little bit of truth to it, but that's mostly just because I've seen it in this context, not so much with trans women, but with cross-dressers, because I've met men who are very much, they identify as men. They feel as if they are men. They are not trans in any way at all, but they create this alternative persona for them that is essentially, in their view, the idealistic woman that they are sexualizing. And a lot of these cross-dressers, they go on the internet, they create these alternative personas, and then they connect with other cross-dressers who are often interested in them as well. And there's also this class of men who are interested in these cross-dressers. And a lot of what they do is this kind of play between gender and who gets to be dominant, who gets to be submissive, a lot of these ideas around how women are supposed to be, right? So something that a lot of these men will appreciate about a cross-dresser is the idea that their femininity is sort of moldable, right? Something that for me was really perceptive of a lot of the cross-dressers that I knew when I was, earlier in my trans life is that a lot of them put themselves together. Mind you, I'm, like I said, 35. A lot of themselves put themselves together like 80s pinup girls. And if you've looked at like 80s pinup, you know what I'm talking about. It is a very particular, specific aesthetic. And that's when I really started to kind of notice that amongst this group of men, they really are trying to become not really women, but like a type of feminine gender expression that is reflective of basically the kind of women who exist in the porn and things that they look at, right? They're literally trying to dress and reference these very particular things, right? And they're often doing it for the satisfaction of other cross-dressers and for some of the men that are involved. And a lot of the men that are involved, some of those men are also cross-dressers, but they will shift between having their like male persona that is having sex and always the dominant, and their female persona that doesn't, typically, the female persona these guys have is very fascinating because a lot of these men, they will only have sex with men when cross-dressed, right? And if they are to get penetrated, they have to be penetrated while wearing women's clothing, because for a lot of these men, they get off on this idea of like a degraded woman, right? And so what they're kind of doing is embodying this degraded woman, who they sexualize, right? And this is something that's so observable. I've seen this so many times. And, one of the reasons I have so much to say about them is because, when I was in the earlier time in my transition, I would have these people approach me a lot. And something that I would personally notice whenever I interacted with these people is oftentimes we would get to a point where I stated a boundary, or I said, I didn't want to do this, or I didn't want to do this, or I said, I want to go out. I want you to take me on a date. And they would say shit like, wow, you really are a woman. Like that wasn't established, right? Because some of these men, right, they will go for trans women or cross-dressers. And yeah, some of these men sort of look at them as the same, especially if the trans woman is early in their trans life, right? They may not really see a huge difference between like a cross-dresser and, a trans woman, right? And what happens for these men is the further along you get, and trans women who have been through this, you will attest, the further you get along in your transition, the closer you get to essentially being able to function the way a cis woman would, the less they're interested in you. These guys hate the idea of you getting surgery. They hate the idea of you having a body that could be potentially indistinguishable from a cis woman's. They really enjoy the idea of you remaining basically a feminized boy, right? And I'm not saying that in terms of like, oh, you're a boy if you don't get the surgery. I mean, a lot of these men, they don't like women. They like feminine gender expression that is typically sexualized on women, right? But if you become someone who has a vagina and is, just the same amount of feminine, right? You will suddenly be shifted into that group of like the disgusting thing that they don't really want. And a lot of these guys, they have a lot to say about women. They have a lot to fucking say about women, and it's all negative. It's all negative. And the way that they sometimes get early in the transition trans girls and cross-dressers is by basically saying, you're so much better than a woman. You're so much better than a woman. And then they will list off all of these reasons why women are terrible. And it's all the things you guys think it would be. The cis woman watching this video, it's all the things you would think it would be. They have children, they're emotional, all this bullshit misogyny, basically. But of course, a lot of times these guys are DL. All these guys are like, not sharing with their lives. Like what's really scary about these dudes, right, is they do have oftentimes entire lives, right? They have wives and and children and all this other stuff. And they maintain that if they can, and actually benefit from it, they maintain that image of like a hyper masculine guy who's heterosexual, right? But like in their heart of hearts, they're cross-dressers. They will steal their wife's clothing. They will go out and they will meet men. They will do all types of crazy shit. And they will actually really enjoy having this kind of like sharp distance between, who they are, as a cross-dresser and who they are in their daily lives, right? Like it is very, in my opinion, diabolical. And most of these people are not trans. They don't want to transition. They're not interested in any of that, right? They are simply kind of playing this like gender game, right? And it's very, very fascinating.